On today's episode, we have Anthony Song, former team lead of SDRs at InsideView, and now recently promoted to account executive.
Today, he'll be sharing his best prospecting philosophies as well as some of his examples so you can use his tactical strategies to crush your quota.
Your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
Awesome. Well, good to be back on another episode of the SDR Live. Today we have Anthony Song. Anthony, thanks for coming on our show today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm honored. Thanks to the viewers out there for watching. I hope I can give you guys some great takeaways from this episode and share what's actually working out there from an SDR perspective, and not just some generic tips and tricks, but real actionable advice. So excited to get started.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, if you can start, I would love to learn a little bit more about the current role that you are now. Obviously, I was doing some research on your LinkedIn. I saw that you're an swimmer and then also a stack record holder. So that's kind of one of the unique facts I found. But yeah, I think that's awesome. If we could start with an intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm currently an account executive at a B2B data company called InsideView. If you're familiar with data companies like ZoomInfo, DiscoverOrg, Dun& Bradstreet, we play in the same space. So hit me up for all of your B2B data needs. But yeah, this is where I started my SDR career. Straight out of college, I went through an SDR prospecting boot camp called SV Academy, where I learned a lot of my foundational sales skills, learned how to cold call, learned how to send cold emails, things like that, and landed my first gig as an SDR at InsideView. And that was back in September 2018, so about a little over a year and a half now. And when I first started, it was me and two other SVA graduates. So shout out to Steven and Sarah Coffey. We were kind of the new guinea pigs in InsideView as far as building out an outbound prospecting SDR team, because it was historically mostly inbound. And we were kind of just really building out that outbound machine. And so that was really interesting. It was a lot of trial and error at first, a lot of cold calling, a lot of hangups, and a lot of long nights trying to figure things out. But when I look back now, it's actually one of my more fonder memories. Really trying to figure out, okay, how can I get some of these prospects to respond to my emails? What can I say on a cold call that's really going to resonate with them and get them to take a meeting with me? And so. I say outbounding is really just an incredible skill set that's going to follow you throughout the rest of your career. Even as an AE, I'm continuing to outbound prospect and seeing results that I couldn't have gotten without the trial and errors when I first started my career. So that's any background. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And most of the viewers probably don't know, but Anthony was actually my team lead, and he was instrumental in kind of building out a lot of our outbound sales plays. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about, give our viewers a little bit more background of the size of the SDR team? How did you lead, as well as we'll begin from there.
Yeah, so our SDR team here is super amazing. I had the opportunity of leading 10 SDRs as well as onboarding 3 new SDRs and hiring those 3. So yeah, it's a lot of it's different, right? Being someone that's in an individual contributor role and then trying to be kind of a player coach at the same time. Almost like if you guys are familiar with basketball, a CP3 of sorts, and trying to coach on the field.
Right.
Listening to cold calls, cold calling with reps, understanding how to break down emails and kind of critiquing and adding, trying to get them to be better every single day. And I really appreciated that experience just because it kind of gave me a foot into what management would be like, which I hope is somewhere down the road, maybe in 3 or 5 years or so. But really just trying to get deep into sales now. So
Thanks for sharing that. Obviously, being a team lead and then becoming an account executive role must have meant that you've had some amazing success throughout your whole history of just being in sales so far. Curious to learn a little bit more about your best month and the best quarter you've had, some of the quota attainment and your achievements.
yeah, sheesh, best quarter I would say was probably Q4 of 2019. So a couple quarters ago. I I hit around, I'm trying to think back, it was around generating around $1.3 million in pipeline,
What?
which was around, I think, 175% of my quota. And yeah, and I'm considered, if it's any context, I was considered an L3 SDR. So having more of an enterprise type pipeline and trying to target enterprise accounts. So if that provides any context, yeah.
Wow, 170% of quota. Like, teach me your wisdom and your insights. And like, I'm so glad that you have a few slides for us to share. So we're gonna give the viewers what they want. You asked for it, so love to get into some of the nit and gritty details of some email personalization that you have done.
Let's dive in. All right, guys. So prospecting best practices. I'll be your host today on this journey, hyper-personalization, featuring your one and only B2B expert, Anthony Song. Let's do this. Just to kind of dive in, I'll talk a little bit about my prospecting philosophy and some of my key pillars that I keep in the back of my head when I'm going about outbound prospecting, especially from an email perspective, which I'll be diving into today. First tip and first pillar is understand your customer. Right? Use their language, use their jargon, and really speak in words that resonate with their day-to-day job and their world, right? Use their lingo and use their jargon. And how do you do that, right? So one way that I try to figure out ways in how I can speak my customer's language and use the same words they're using and like understand what kind of pains they're going through on a day-to-day basis. I listen to podcasts. So a lot of the people that I like to target are within sales operations or sales leadership or marketing leadership. And there's tons of podcasts out there that, feature great leaders and people that just like to talk about their pains or their day-to-day struggles or, some of their successes, whatever it might be. It's all great ways to just learn and kind of absorb their world, right? So that's the first thing. Other places to find that information is like if you have Gong or some kind of customer recording software. Another underrated one is job postings, right? I don't know if you two have been using job postings as like ways to gather intel. I love them personally because they share insights around who they're hiring for and like what some of their internal jargon and words are, some of their culture, as well as some of their tech stack too. Like you can see like, oh, you need proficiency around using Salesforce and Outreach or whatever tools they might be using. And so that's always a great way to leverage information.
That's actually some really good information, but I've actually never used podcasts as a way to do like more outbounding. So, when you're listening to a podcast, are you like taking notes or do you have a photographic memory or how does that work?
Yeah, like for me, it's just casual listening. Like I'll end my day with some like some Salesforce admin work and input some data and like, have a podcast just running in the background that I'll listen to, like a sales operations podcast. And those are just great ways for me to not only like gather information around like what does the typical day-to-day look like for my customer. It's also just a great way to outbound to them as well. Like, personalize the email and say, hey, I listened to your podcast, noticed you had some issues around some data quality. Maybe I can help. Okay, so we talked about understanding your customers. Second tip is, shoot to start a conversation rather than aiming for the meeting. And I know some sales managers or SDR managers might be like, no, that's a terrible tip. Like you should be asking for the meeting. But I've always thought in the back of my head, like, how can I get them to be curious about what I'm saying, or, how can I get them to engage in wanting to speak to me? Because that has always led me to getting the meeting as opposed to just asking for time on their calendar. Like it's a very hard commitment asking for 30 minutes on someone's calendar. I know like if any SDR prospected me and asked for 30 minutes, it's just like, it's a very hard commitment. I'm just kind of like, maybe, yes, no, if I have the time even. But if someone wants to start a conversation with me, ask me a few key questions that affect my day-to-day or like gets me to think about something differently, that's a lot more compelling for me. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is A/B test relentlessly. Especially during the times we live in now, we see everyone changing their messaging. We're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work for our prospects and what resonates. You need to be A/B testing. You got to be constantly experimenting and shifting different things like your call to action or your hook or your subject line, whatever it might be. You got to constantly be experimenting and have kind of a scientific hat with that. So yeah, and then last but not least, be you, be authentic, whether you're cold calling, whether you're cold emailing, people can smell fakeness from miles away. And so it's always best to lead with your authentic foot, I guess is the best way to say that.
Right, just being genuine, it's so important. Just because people can smell that fakeness. A lot of times you're trying to ask for a meeting and you're just kind of saying something or like hyper personalizing just so you can kind of get their attention when it's not even that relevant to like a product that you're selling, or just kind of telling them you did your homework, quote unquote, but not really showing them like how it's most relevant. And I think you're going to share some great strategies on what's to come next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like people that personalize their email, quote unquote, and like send stuff like, "Oh, hey, I saw you grew up in Michigan." Like, "Oh, hey, yeah, it looks like a beautiful area." Anyway, we're the number one software for X, Y, and Z. I'm just like, what? It's like you're not showing that you're being authentic, and you're literally being that car salesman in the form of a cold email. So, 100%. But those are my, I guess, few top pillars when I'm thinking about prospecting. Let's actually dive into some real life examples for y'all. So this is the first one, is a point about using visuals in your prospecting strategy. With this one, for example, the person I was targeting, for context, was a sales operations director. And she actually posted on her LinkedIn that she was hiring for a sales ops manager. And so as an opening hook, I was like, "Hey, bad news. I don't have a great sales ops manager referral for you today, but on good news, I do have something that I might think might be able to help that future hire."
Oh,
And
wow.
on the job posting, she had, coming back to using your customer's language, she had some information around, the future hire for this role will be, dealing with account ownership and data quality issues, and things of that nature. So, it kind of gives me some insights around, what they're investing for in the future, and, what problems they might be encountering based on my experience, talking to other people in a role. So using that as a hook, I also said, I noticed that BuzzFeed was a key customer over at the XYZ company. How I found that out was just doing some quick research on their website. It takes 2 minutes. Just every website has some featured customers. And I asked, like, "Hey, does that sales rep that owns BuzzFeed also own all of their global subsidiaries?" So I'm trying to pose a question in her brain, like get her thinking around, how do we do this internally, right? Because a question that we ask a lot of our sales operations peers is, if an inbound lead comes in and, say one sales rep owns, for example, Disney, and an inbound lead comes in for Marvel or for ESPN, all subsidiaries of Disney, do those leads end up going to that guy that owns the Disney account, or does it go to other people? And especially if you have territories, you can kind of imagine like how that all gets mixed up, right? So this was kind of an example using BuzzFeed. I'll show you guys a close-up image of that. So this was actually an internal picture of our data in our product, and so I literally took that screenshot of our product internally, and sent that over to her in a context that was relevant to her. So BuzzFeed, being their customer, wanted to show them that data to get them thinking, And some other lines that said, as you grow, it's important to make sure leads are routed to the right global rep and that your Salesforce data can support this at scale. So kind of my quick value prop there. And then as a closing statement, kind of my soft call to action, if you want to say it, I said, "Not sure if the timing is right, but do you think a short conversation would make sense?" So instead of asking for 30 minutes on our calendar, I was kind of vulnerable in the sense like, "Hey, I'm not really sure if the timing is right, but, do you think a conversation would even make sense for us?" It's a very easy yes or no. And I think, it works a lot better and feels a lot better to ask as opposed to asking for 30 minutes, which is what I like to call a hard commitment. And then as you can see, she said, "This is a great email. Make sure your boss knows you're crushing it." Obviously, I had to show my boss's email after getting that. And, it started a conversation like, "What does your product do? We use distribution engines for routing. Does your company help with parent-child relationships or other data quality things?" Starting a conversation in, things around my solutions that can help her. So
It sounds like it eventually led to a meeting of some sort.
it did, yeah. It led to a meeting and had some good conversation. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I have to like give a clap because like, wow, I mean, you're even getting the prospect to say great email, which is like, Andy, I've actually never have gotten a response like that from a prospect. Have you?
I have, and it's really from using Anthony's strategy because he was obviously the SDR team lead for a reason because he has great kind of outbound plays. And if you follow this format, like I would love to kind of dive a little deeper for our audience because there's so many great nuggets just in this like 4 to 5 sentences. And I like to me, there's like four big topics that I would love to touch on. Like the first topic, if you look at the first sentence right here, it's you kind of show them that, oh, yes, I've been on your LinkedIn. I'm doing my homework on you. I know that you're looking for, you just recently shared a job posting. So like that's obviously gold just right off the bat. And then second, you show them that, oh, I'm going to do homework, not just on you, but I'm going to do homework on your customers too. And then on top of that, you're using relevant visuals to grab their attention. Like how can InsideView directly help your customers? Here's a visual, bam, like that's amazing. And then lastly, you keep it so concise and short. Like there's just so much gold in here.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking the same thing. I really liked sentence two, I guess you can say, or line two. Also, what I noticed is that you're spacing like almost like your intro, your value prop, like the different customers on like one sentence. Is that, on purpose? I've actually haven't done that, but that's actually really cool. Do you do that on purpose?
Yeah, for sure. So this is something that I learned from a lot of, infamous LinkedIn copywriters, as if you want to call it. But there's really valuable ways. People don't like looking at sentences like having sentences like clumped together. People like white space. We like having room. It gives us, space. I don't know how you want to say it from a psychology perspective, but people like having, breathable room to read stuff. And like, so that's why I like to include lots of nice little spacing here as opposed to just clumping all those sentences together. Like people just don't like reading that. And I hate reading that, especially. It's just an eyesore. So yeah, that is very intentional, and it's a great point. I space out those sentences and try to space it out, like with the value prop, with the call to action, and then the first two sentences to kind of get her attention. So
Yeah. And then I guess the last point that I would make, which I think I've also have found success, is not asking such a hard ask of like, do you have 30 minutes? Right. I always like to say like, hey, not sure if the timing is right, similar to what you said, or at least trying to play it softly, just because like I think you guys are probably the same way, but when I get prospected too, I'll still get prospected and someone says 30 minutes, I automatically think, no, I don't know about you, but it's like, no, I don't have 30 minutes. And so like the way you easily like put that in there is like super interesting.
Right. And
for
I
sure.
also kind of just want to point out that once you're highlighting that BuzzFeed is a key customer on the second sentence, like after you show them that you've done your homework, you're using a visual to kind of show them like this is the value prop that we can immediately add value to. And I think that is just very like gold.
Thanks, guys. Well, so that's number one as far as using visuals to aid your value prop or help grab attention. All right. So here, let's hop into number two. And as you guys look at this, I think it's also important to keep in mind that these are like different messagings that I used throughout my SDR career around different timelines. And so you'll notice like different elements throughout all these emails, just because I'm experimenting all the time, as you should. So let's dive into this one. My title sentence was scaling revenue globally. Some things, keywords that I thought my persona would gravitate towards or would resonate with, I guess is the better word to say. Sales ops thinks about scaling. They think about how to help their sales reps produce revenue, and they think about, well, for this one specifically, how to scale globally. So, I said, hey, Mr. Prospect, congratulations to XYZ company on a strong 2019 with the addition of new logos like Visa and NASA. I did my research on as far as like news and seeing like, oh, hey, like they finished the quarter off strong and acquired these big logo customers. So I want to lead off with that. And then I said, I understand as you plan for 2020, scaling globally and increasing your international footprint in EMEA and North America will continue to be a strong emphasis. So those are also just things I read off their company news. I think it was just, I used InsideView. InsideView, we provide insights around company news. So whenever things like they're expanding globally or getting new funding, I'll get an alert on my homepage, on my Gmail, just seeing that. So I use that information to kind of help structure this email. It's nice and neat. And on that blocked black bar right there, which I hid because if it's a competitor, I understood they were using a competitor, and I said, based on the news, I said, hey, this XYZ competitor tends to lack coverage in these EMEA regions, which can affect your sales and marketing outreach and lead routing ability. So something that just kind of catches attention, like maybe spark some pain around something that he didn't already know was a pain. And I said, would it make sense to connect over how we can supplement or consolidate your data? So either asking like, hey, can we be another data provider that can help you grow globally, or just completely replace them? Either way, it should be, I thought it was a good way to spark some conversation. And, I think an SDR, like the number one goal for an SDR is like, send an email and get that meeting instantly. And this is one of those use cases where like the guy replied and like, he recommended some times, and he even had some initiative around some account hierarchy mapping. So like literally like something that we're A+ in. So for me, this felt like getting a kickoff return and sending it 100 yards straight for a touchdown. This is exactly what that feels like. Amazing feeling as an SDR, and just straight and simple to the point.
And it looks like you applied on the same day too, so you get that gratification. You must have been thrilled.
Oh yeah, I definitely ate an extra cheesecake that day to celebrate for sure.
Oh man, I love it. Like I've been fortunate enough to get this too. This is like the holy grail of like SDR. When you can create, an email and then get that response the same day, it's like so gratifying. Oh my gosh. Like, but this is great. Like I was looking at it more like, I like your call to action, right? Again, it's not a hard ask, would it make sense? But also I saw some personality in there in your footer of your, what is that?
Yes. So that right there is, it's like a meme centered around sales operations. So sales operations people, they're always pestering their sales reps to, stay in Salesforce or use their CRM or update their, their Salesforce data. I'm sure you guys both know that pain well. And so, this is just kind of speaking a little comedy, making sure that letting them know that I'm a human too. It's like, if you could just update your CRM, that'd be great. So, just a little funny joke there.
I love it. It's textbook, execution. Again, I think I'm going to start also incorporating the fact that you just space everything out on a line. That's actually something I've actually never done. So I'm really jazzed to start that.
And I kind of just want to point out that like part of being a great salesperson is not only understanding the pros and cons of your own product, but also understanding kind of the advantages and disadvantages and some of the pains that comes with a competitor. And the fact that you can identify that in this like hyper-personalized email, like it not only shows that you're doing your homework again on like knowing what they need, but also understanding like who they're currently using, their tech stack, but then identifying the pain that they might have.
And one thing that caught my attention was this reply. A lot of times as an SDR, I'm not sure if you guys have found it, but someone will say, just like schedule time, right? Or it's like, I'm free like Tuesday. And you're like, oh, like, are they really interested? Are they not interested? But in this case, I would think this turned into pipeline just because the way he responded, he or she, I'm not sure who it is, but I mean, let's look, right? So they said, let's connect. But then they said, we recently consolidate our blank, 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 right? And they gave you some context. So now, like as an SDR, you can hand this off to your AE and be like, hey, like this is some of the context that they want to uncover, right? And then you can go in and do a little bit more research. So you're preparing your AE to have a successful next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually curious to get your thoughts, Marcos. Like when you get a yes from an outbound prospect, whether that's through cold calling or through cold email, are you taking that first meeting with your prospect, or are you sending that straight to your AE? I know a lot of companies have different philosophies around that. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Different philosophies for sure. So when I was at Optimizely, I was working more the strategic accounts. And so it really depends also on your AE, right? So like sometimes, I had this great AE, shout out like James Clifford, but he wanted to take all first meetings, right? He was like, you get a response, I'm taking the first meeting, because sometimes AEs say, you know what, like I'm more experienced, I want to take that call, I want to be there from day one. But then I also had other AEs that were like super strict and said, hey, like you need to take that first call. You need to go out and, uncover some of their pains or weaknesses. And so I know there's some best practices out there like BANT, right? Budget, authority, need, timing, next steps. But at Optimizely, I would say it was hit and miss depending on how my AE wanted it structured. And I guess just as a quick like tip for any SDR, like if your AE wants to take all first calls, like totally fine. Just make sure that they're set up for success so you can get that pipeline. But also understand like if they want you to take it, like go in there and have the mindset that you're the AE, right? That you're taking this call for a reason and it's eventually going to help you down the line, because when you are an AE, like you have to take these calls, right? There's no, hiding behind it. So that's something I would say. It really depends.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I know for this one specifically, I shot this one straight to my AE just because I knew like there was instant initiative. Sometimes AEs like they don't want to take outbound meetings just because like there's not an automatic initiative or there's no buying initiative around their company or whatever. But like you said, some AEs they want to make sure that they're engaging the customer from the first get-go. So good points there.
Yeah, and just something to note, what I also do sometimes is if I don't get enough like juice, right? So like what I take into consideration is like, all right, the prospect that responded, do they have a LinkedIn? And like I would say like the profiles that are filled out on LinkedIn that have a lot of information, you could kind of start putting the bits and pieces together to help your AE have a successful call. But ones where it's like they have no LinkedIn presence, they said they would do it, I might just say, hey, I would reply to this email, say, hey, I appreciate your time. I'll send over a calendar invite real quick, just so we're prepared. What would you want to, or what would you look, or what would be most valuable to you in a conversation that's coming up? Just so I can have some context. And I even do that as an AE right now, right? I'll get a response and I'll say, hey, like, what are some, key initiatives you're looking to do? And if they respond, then great, I'm prepared. If not, then, I'm going into the meeting kind of blind, so.
All right, so kind of jumping into my last email here. So this was actually like one of my, I guess, earliest successes around personalization. And looking back at this one, there's a lot of things that I would change. But kind of looking back, I look back at this one fondly just because, well, first of all, the response, was a great boost to my confidence and ego. And they also compliment SVA. She was a potential SVA prospective employer. But also the fact that it was just very short and direct and kind of constantly makes me think back, and sometimes just being short and direct is all you need to start a conversation and get that meeting. It got the job done. So let's just dive into it, and I'll say what I would change about it looking back. But I was like, hey, prospect, I must say I was absolutely blown away by your extensive Golden State Warriors history knowledge. I doubt 60% of current Warrior fans even know who Don Nelson is today. Haha. And that's true, by the way. I don't think a lot of Warriors fans today know who Don Nelson is. He's like a former Warriors legend back in the day. But I found that information based on the company's leadership page. They had a little quick bio, and I took some time to just understand my prospect and her background. And one thing that caught my eye personally was, this knowledge that she was just such a fan of Don Nelson. And I was like, wow. So this was being authentic. Like I was actually legitimately blown away by this and wanted to include that. And the second line, I said, just being direct, hey, I'm reaching out because I understand your sales team is going after companies in a variety of industries. I looked at their websites to kind of just see like, oh, what kind of industries are they specifically targeting, for their software or services. Some of those examples were e-commerce, travel, and SaaS. I think our database is a great fit for your reps to be more targeted and reach the decision makers they're looking for. So very simple and very direct. And then I asked as a call to action, is it okay if I follow up with more information? Just asking for a consent, like, would you be open to learning more about this? Kind of gaining her curiosity based on like what I know about her and who she's targeting, and then trying to see if I can, bait her with more education, if you want to say it that way. But looking back at this one, what I would change is that, yes, I personalized, yes, I took the time to know her, but especially in 2020, like it's personalization, but personalization with relevance, right? So how can you take that personalization and then tie it back into how it's going to help her job or do her job better? Like, yes, I know that Don Nelson is someone that you look up to and someone that you're a fan of, but like, how does that even have anything to do with your sales team, right? Or your SDR team? Because this person was the head of sales development. So if I was to look back, I would probably, change it and try to shift it, the messaging around, like, how she could better target e-commerce. I don't know how I'd do that, like right here now. I didn't think of it, but yeah, those are just some thoughts. But obviously, she gave a shout out to SV Academy and like what we've been learning there. And she was like, "Oh, I've been thinking about working with the org. Guess it's time for me to do it." And so, shameless plug to SVA. Shout out to SVA for giving us the training.
And even though the personalization wasn't like as relevant, at the end of the day, as a seller, like we'll still celebrate a win. And it looks like this one got you the meeting and got you to the next step.
Just taking a deep dive real quick, just my initial first impressions. Like, I think you're a little bit too critical on yourself. Like, I agree the fact that, you want to have relevant personalization, right? And like, what the heck does Don Nelson have to do with like, data, right, et cetera? But like, something to know as well is that you got his or her attention, right? You got the prospect's attention. That's like some really hard research to do. Like, I wouldn't even have known that first sentence. And so like, for you to either find that on a podcast or reading blog articles, like, first off, like, bravo to you. But I do agree in the sense where it's like, okay, like, what does that have to do? But dude, like, you still got the meeting. That's great.
And this is the epitome of like hyper personalization. I'm kind of curious to learn, like, what are your channels on like trying to find content or like things that you can connect with the prospect?
Yeah, great question. So I'm a big fan of social media as someone that's a little bit addicted to it myself. So I'm always on Twitter, Instagram. Sometimes, like, prospects have Pinterest, and you can see like their mood boards and stuff like that, and get an understanding of their hobbies. Like, they're big on cooking or home decor or whatever. I wouldn't always use that in the email, but it's just like interesting to know. And some might even say that's controversial. Is that a step too far into privacy, using some of their personal facts into prospecting? I don't think so. I feel like it's just a way for me to try to connect with them in a genuine way, but I can understand the other side of it too. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, so much about being an SDR is just being tenacious and going out and trying new things. And I think something you talked about early on is just A/B testing everything. Like, you're never going to know if something doesn't work if you don't try it, right? But real quick, I know a lot of SDRs like fail to like do this, right? They're like, I don't know, like, I don't want to take the risk because like, at the end of the day, this was a head of sales development, you said, right? This is like a high level target, right? If you, in theory, mess this up, then your chances of getting into that account are 0, right? That's what some people say. So like, how do you just take risks, or do you just, like, just kind of wing it? Like, your strategy is just, I'm curious, like, that's awesome.
yeah, absolutely. And kind of coming back to the point where, when I started out as an SDR, outbound SDR here at InsideView, I was a guinea pig, right? There was really no set processes in place, no real go-to templates or sequences or anything like that. So it was just like, it was figure it out or fail. It was like, that was my mindset going into it. So I got to really try everything, go for it, even if it's going to, lead to some nasty responses. I'm going to go for it anyway and see what I can get. So that's kind of the mindset I have and continue to have even as an account executive.
That's great. And thanks for sharing. And kind of on the topic of like failing, I'm kind of curious just for our audience to know that like they should still expect kind of some sort of failure, like with your even hyper personalization messages. Can you give us kind of like a statistic overview of like how many emails you send out and like how many people reply, so that people know that, hey, they're following your strategies, but they're not seeing immediate success? When should they stop, and when should they like keep pushing and continuing?
Yeah, so I'll say my average maybe email response rate in a personalized sequence is around 12 to 13%.
What?
So
Oh
yeah,
my
so that's
gosh.
and that's taking into consideration like things like automated replies and follow-ups and things like that. So that's 13%, and like just if you look at the outreach stats on a holistic level. So that's kind of like my anchor. Like, I gotta be around there. Typically, like I'd say if you're around 8 to 10%, like you're in a good place. If 1 out of every 10 prospects are replying to your email, and it could be good or bad. So that's saying like 2 out of 20 prospects are taking a meeting with you. do personalized email. And, obviously you can continue tailoring that and adding other things to help scale that. Beck Collin has great resources around scaling personalization and adding different variables into your sequences to help you save time. But yeah, like as far as like my own stats, I say 13% is what I shoot for as far as like responses, right?
That's like amazing. That's like holy grail of like outbounding. Like 12% reply rate is just, that's almost like it's an inbound, dude. That's awesome.
I think also is just like I almost prefer outbounding to inbound leads now, because outbound I get to choose like my targets, and if I know who my ideal customer is, like my probability of especially if I know their pains, if my probability of closing them or generating pipeline with them if I was an SDR is a lot higher, as opposed to just targeting whoever and waiting for whatever that comes inbound, which could be shit really if you ever had inbound leads before. Exactly. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Being able to be good at outbounding is a very crucial skill for sure.
Yeah, I mean, this whole presentation, like, super valuable to just me, even as an AE now on the job. Like, if I had this as an SDR, I would totally like implement it and give it a shot. And that's like a call to action for any SDR that's, listening to this, is try out Anthony's strategies. And so I guess wrapping up here, just have a few questions. Do you love to win or hate to lose?
The infamous sales interview question. I love it. So I'd say my answer to that is that I always come into anything expecting to win. I'm very competitive. I come from a background of competitive swimming. So always expect to win and hate to lose. So yeah, that's my answer.
Great. Next rapid fire question. Who is your favorite thought leader in sales?
Ooh, that's really hard. A few people come to mind. Josh Braun, because he's someone that really uses psychology and ties that into sales. Someone that really is a masterful copywriter. So shout out to Josh Braun. Beck Collin, who I've had the opportunity to meet a few times through her Flip the Script live events, as well as through Dreamforce. Really great personality and someone that's just an amazing thought leader in the SDR space and prospecting space. And yeah, some other people, I guess, KD, John Barrows. I know you only asked for one, but like, those are all just really influential leaders that I personally follow every single day.
Well, real quick too on that, and you just mentioning all those leaders, that tells me that you're a student of the game, right? Like you actually went through and said, who are the best sales leaders? And I want to learn from them. And so like, that's amazing. Have you read, any books regarding sales, any of them that you would recommend to our audience?
Yeah, man, for sure. So the first one I'll recommend to my SDRs out there is Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt. It's a famous one. You guys might know it. Awesome. But really helped me, understand the concept of time blocking, understanding the underlying reason for like why prospecting is probably the number one thing in sales success, right? Because salespeople with fat pipelines are able to close deals, and that's just the truth of the matter. So that's a big book for me. And then the second one is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Yeah. Negotiating is a skill that whether you're in sales or not, is just a very important skill, and kind of the understanding and unpacking the human psychology with that book was huge for me. So
wow, those are some great insights. We'll put links in our description on those books for sure.
And since we talked about social media, if we put your handle down, do you follow back?
Yeah, for sure. Follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Twitch. Follow me on all the social medias now. But for real, for everyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free. Happy to always chat about outbounding strategies, best practices, and just connect. Sales is a tough role. Being an SDR is a tough role, but we're in this together. And I think what I've learned over the past 1.5 years of doing this is that the best are constantly just trying to learn. So shout out to whoever's listening to this podcast, trying to get better. That's the name of the game, right?
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week and have a fantastic week.